I shall hand over to Bea and Chris. Enjoy yourselves.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Bea, and I am the musical inclusion practitioner and manager from Drake Music. I am a white woman and I have long brown hair, wearing glasses today, and my favourite, tiger top, but it's black and white, so they look a bit like zebras. So that's who I am. Chris, do you want to say hi?
Hello, hi. My name's Chris Halpin. I work with Drake Music as an associate musician. I am a white man with the regulation lockdown man bun and big beard. I'm wearing a red jumper which says Toronto Raptors on it. You have no idea who that is, do you? And for some reason that will become clear in a moment, I'm wearing some very strange looking gloves.
Thank you, Chris. Very exciting. So our session today, we've got slides that we can share on the screen, but with the platform, there we go, that's the word I wanted, with the platform that we're using, Mentimeter, you can also access it from a phone or an alternative device or an alternative computer window. We find that this gives you a bit of extra autonomy on how you want to engage, so you don't need to sort of be staring rigidly at the screen for the whole hour and a half. So let me pop the code for our and the address for the website in the chat. So it's www.menti.com, and when you get there, the number that you want for our slideshow is 9622 8350. And once you've landed on there, you should see a Drake Music social model holding slide, which is green and has some electrical wires on it. If you like, you can respond on there as well. There's several options of ways to engage with it. There's the heart, the question mark, the thumbs up, the thumbs down, which is of course an option that Zoom doesn't give us, so feel free to indulge with that. And also, and enigmatically, the cat, which is my favourite one. So, oh good, look, there we go, we've got a response for thumbs up there. That's good, that's working. If you would like me to share the slides on the presentation on Zoom as well, please do let me know in the chat. If not, I will keep them away because then I can see faces, which is quite nice. So, yes, that's the start of that. Now I'm going to go to our next slide, which is called Accessing the Session. So I just wanted to talk to you a bit about how we're improving access to the session. So when we come to doing some descriptions of ourselves, and we'd love for you to take part of that if you feel like it, please audio describe yourself as Chris and I did at the beginning where possible. Feel free to turn your video off and have a stand up and stretch, move around in your home. Ask questions of us in whatever way is accessible to you. So that might be the chat box, that might be raising a hand, and it might be raising a hand to then unmute and speak. It might be through the Menti slides when there are options to do that. So yeah, ask questions in ways that are accessible to you. I'm gonna just say this because we were going to have some breakout rooms, but we'll have some spaces for discussion, so always listen carefully and avoid interrupting. Speak respectfully to one another, of course, and appropriate language. As I say, we'll be using Mentimeter to interact, and if you could pop your correct Zoom name on, which I think everyone has, so we can address you as you'd like to be, that's really helpful as well. Okay, so the aims of our session are thus. We are going to give you a clear introduction to the social model. We make no bones of the fact that there's a lot in this model and there's a lot of things to think about within what we're going to say. So we would like to really point out this is an introduction, and there is more information out there afterwards to be sought, but we hope this gives you a good beginning. We're going to give you some examples of lived experience of disability in a music education. We are going to be exploring language to use around disability in a safe space together, which Chris will be helping us facilitate. And we'll be examining how to apply the ideas of the social model in a classroom setting. So, jumping on, there we are. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on Drake Music. Chris, feel free to jump in here now if I miss any key information about what it is that we do, because we do quite a lot. It was one of the things I asked actually in my interview for the job. Is there anything we don't do, you know, when it comes to disability? And our CEO looked me straight in the eye and said, I'd like to think there's never anything that we won't try, which I found incredibly intimidating, but also very inspiring as well. So yes. Here we are. So we are innovators, educators, curators and advocates in the field of disability in music. What that means is we do a lot of very diverse projects, from working with pupils in schools and in educational establishments, to working with people in care settings, to facilitating established performers, disabled performers, to access the sphere and performing opportunities more easily. It's a very mixed bag, and also a lot on advocacy as well. We do a lot of shouting about what we think needs to happen in the sector. We really believe that everyone has the right to express themselves creatively through music, and that's something that the social model really talks about as well, and you'll hear from Chris with his anecdotal examples as we go on, that it's not always easy for that to happen, particularly if you're in an educational setting with a disability and access isn't being thought about. So that is something that we're really, really pushing for, that everyone has the right to express themselves creatively through music. So Drake's MO, the way that we're different from other charities, is that we use technologies and ideas to open up access to music for all. So we have a strand at our office in London called the R&D strand, which isn't a type of music. It stands for research and development. I thought it was a type of music to start with, but yeah, R&D is research and development. We hold regular meetings called our DM labs, where makers and innovators come together and talk about ideas they've had for new instruments to open up access, which is cool. I always think that picture that we've got in the slide there looks like a bionic arm, something very exciting. But yeah, we do a lot of work building new instruments. And finally, our vision is a world where disabled and non-disabled musicians work together as equals, which seems a good, healthy aspiration to have, and we hope that you join us in that as well. So that's a little bit about Drake. Chris, have I missed anything exciting about Drake?
Yeah, as I think we'll talk about more in this session. Artistic development is becoming more a part of how Drake Music is operating. It's something that I was in part of the early stages of, and I've seen that advance quite a lot with some exciting projects that are happening at the moment. So yeah, the development of career paths for disabled musicians is becoming another strand to what we do now.
Thanks for that, Chris. Yes, indeed, that's great. Okay, so we're going to do a temperature check now. So I've done these slides on Mentimeter so you can contribute on there. But if we are, because we are small in number, it would be fine to use the chat box as well. So we'd love for you just to take a minute to tell us something about your current work, what you're doing, who you're working with, size of the groups, that kind of thing. Yeah. Where and with who, for example. Take your time with this, there's no rush on it. Great. I think that is still one of the most unnerving things to do on Zoom, is to stop talking and give people some time to answer. Yeah, I was keeping an eye on the clock there, and wow, that was just a minute. Is that enough time? I hope so. You can stay on the slide as well and keep filling something in, but thank you very much if you've popped something in there.
Thanks, people posting in the chat. I'm just catching up on these now.
Ah, great. Thanks, Chris. Amazing. Thank you for that, Anne. Thanks, Namala. That's brilliant. Super. So now we wondered if you would mind giving us a word or a sentence or a thought that will mean that today's session has been useful for you. So my prompt for you is, today's session will be useful if ... Take some time to think about that. I'll give you a minute or two to think about it.
That's great, thanks, Sarah. Obviously, it almost goes without saying, but there will be time for questions, and we will try and answer any questions that come up during the session. At any time, you feel free to dive into the chat if that's easy and accessible to you. We'll be throwing a lot of information at you in a relatively short space of time, I must admit. But you know, obviously, we're here to help and make sure that this is as useful as possible.
Great. Thank you for those answers to that question appearing in the chat. Super. So we've got a couple of answers there. If it opens doors, great. I feel confident sharing the social model of disability and implementing it with my committee. Great. Thanks, Sarah. If it opens doors, brilliant. Like the door next to me is opening now in an alarming way. Working from home? No, thank you. I'm being offered an orange. It's not the time. Right. So great. Thank you for those answers. That's really helpful. So we've got a little temperature check now. And again, feel free to engage in the chat with these as well, or interactively with the Menti slides. So they're just agree or disagree statements. There's no judgment on these. There's no right or wrong. It's just a temperature check for us to see where people are at, see how we're feeling, and it's just a good log. Every group is different, so these are questions that we ask regularly, just to see how people are thinking about their current practice. So do you agree or disagree with these statements? Our first one is that disabled and non-disabled musicians can play together successfully. So you can have strongly agree, agree, unsure, disagree, strongly disagree. Or you can choose not to answer, of course, as well. Answers straight in there for strongly agree. It's awesome. Oh, and agree. Nice. Brilliant. Again, no judgment on what you say, because we're all here to learn, and this is a space for us to think together and challenge our preconceptions from both sides, really. Okay, great. Thanks for those answers. Our next one is, there is a place for music technology in traditional ensembles. You're scanning through again from strongly agree, agree, unsure, disagree, strongly disagree. Brilliant. We're all getting the hang now. Look at those, the slides coming in, the information landing. Brilliant. Although actually I need to share that with you, don't I, so you can see it. We've got strongly agrees in the lead, agree is second, and unsure is third on that one. Cool. Here's the next one. There is a place for adapted instruments in traditional ensembles. So thinking about orchestras, youth orchestras, bands, folk, everything. There is a place for adapted instruments in traditional ensembles. We've got a couple of strongly agrees in there and an agree. Cool. Thanks everyone, that's really helpful to see. Right, on we go to the next slide. So that was our little temperature check. And now, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone, this is Chris Halpin's moment to shine. And Chris, we're running magnificently to time.
You really are.
I know, bang on the money. So let's keep it that way. So this is great, and it's nice that we've got a small group actually, because we're going to do a sort of pseudo interviewee type thing now with Chris, and you're going to talk about your experiences as a disabled musician in education. Yes. So if you have questions or things come up as we go, please pop them in the chat, and we can feed them into the discussion. So Chris, I'm shutting up.
Hi. Hello everyone, my name's Chris Halpin. I'm a musician, of course, primarily, and an associate musician of Drake Musics, first of all. I'm a disabled musician. I have cerebral palsy. It affects the right hand side of my body primarily. It's given me a mobility impairment and some hand issues, and led me on a strange journey to being a musician with Drake Music. Strange good, but some of it just strange. I'll just go with that. But yeah, so where should we start, B? It's a big, long story.
It's a big, long story, yeah. I mean, I think the tradition dictates the beginning. Probably we should start at the beginning with what was it you wanted to, when you were in a music class, what was it that you wanted to get out of that? When did you realise you were musical and wanted to participate?
Yeah, so music for me was a real very, very early. Like my parents are very musical. My dad played guitar and was in bands and stuff, and I just was almost instinctively knew that was what I wanted to do, even at a really early age. By the time I was 4, I hadn't learned to walk yet, but I'd already decided I was going to be a famous rock star. How that fitted together in my mind, it all made sense in my head at that age, and still does. So yeah, that journey was obviously driven quite a lot by the guitar. My hand impairment affects my access to traditional instruments, of course, but with some perseverance, by about the age of 10, I'd kind of got the hang of being able to hold a guitar and play a guitar. School was a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest, in terms of the support that I got. I was really well supported with the guitar. I had a great guitar teacher who was well known in the sort of 80s. He was in a group called The Selector, a Coventry band. The whole ska thing is massive where I live, and he was a big name on that scene. And he, I think out of boredom, became a peripatetic music teacher after the band split up, and so he was the school guitar teacher. Faced some more barriers that you might expect, unfortunately. I also wanted to learn the piano. I had piano lessons at school very briefly, and was gently kicked out, I would guess, because I couldn't, my right hand is quite stiff and it's quite difficult to play a melody, for example. So it was very much a what we'd call a medical model, as we'll come to in a minute, approach to thinking about music playing, i.e. you've got something wrong with you, so you can't do this, so off you go.
Wow. I mean, did you feel that you were being pushed out of the piano lessons? Was that something that that came more from your teacher than from you? Were you enjoying your lessons?
Yeah, well, I had big aspirations to play the piano, but it just felt that, I guess I was being nudged out, because at that age I had, this is why we're here today, to talk about the social model and how that influences how disabled people see themselves. But at the time I was firmly in the understanding that this was my problem, because it's my body, I've got something wrong with me, so that's why I've got to go. It didn't, at that age I certainly wouldn't have thought to turn that around and think about the methodology that the teacher was applying, and that obviously the system is wrong. It's not that I'm wrong. I'm not in the wrong for having a medical condition, but that's how it was framed at that point. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I know that's something that we could talk about a bit more as well. Is that there's so much tradition often in the way that so many instruments are taught. You know, this is the way I learned it from my teacher. This is the way I'm going to teach it to you because that's what I know.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
go on.
Well, yeah, there was just no kind of thought for that. I mean, later on in life, I learned to play a few like Eric Satie pieces that were very left-hand heavy, for example. That gave me a little party piece. Dun, 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 dun. I was like, oh, I can play something, you know, that sounds proper, like it, you know, because that's just that's not even accessible tech. That was just a simple reframing the impairment through repertoire. Just a very simple way to solve the problem, which I didn't come to until well into adulthood. So hang on, I can play. There's stuff I can play, right? And I developed my own way of playing the piano. I do play piano. There's plenty of bits of me on YouTube playing the piano. I just sort of found my own way with it. But was I encouraged and supported to get there? No.
So it's quite a lonely journey, that part then.
Yeah, it all is. It all is pretty lonely. Wouldn't say I didn't like that. I'm quite a... It's not that didn't suit me. Like, I like kind of forging my own path with things, but yeah, for sure, it's not great for participatory music making.
So just thinking about that was kind of the peripatetic individual lesson kind of thing. Did it affect you in the classroom as well, and how you were able to access?
Yeah, classroom was kind of. The general thing at school was kind of weird because there was some teachers who really sort of, because of my physical impairment, they made the extra leap that there was a cognitive impairment. I was always a relatively high achiever. I was usually predicted, you know, high grades for wherever stage we were at. And yet there were teachers who spoke to me in incredibly condescending kind of like, do you need help with that? Like, no, I'm fine. So those kind of attitudes are very odd to encounter, and even as a child, I got the feeling that that's not how it's supposed to be. But I didn't really have the framework that I do now to be like, you know, that's not my problem to solve. If you want to be weird around a disabled person, that's not the disabled person's problem, as we're going to talk about later in this session. So the biggest barrier for me at school was that I went to a school where there was no elevator, lift, however you want to call it, and so at times when my mobility impairment was more severe, I had to struggle with a lot of stairs anyway, and then I had some more significant health setbacks around the age of 14, 15, and I was put in isolation for most of my GCSE, so about 2 years I was put in isolation because I couldn't access the classrooms. So the accessible solution was that I spent most of that time on my own, with friends bringing work to me. It's really odd looking back. I'm like, wow, that's not how inclusion works at all. But hey, this was the 90s. People hadn't heard of us yet.
Yeah, the 90s. I mean, but I can imagine still a relevant problem actually in some of the older school buildings, and with people teaching who perhaps haven't thought of that. That just feels so so cold. The idea that you were put in isolation because there was no lift. You know.
Which is the same thing that they would do with someone who was misbehaving or would, you know, it was a punishment in effect.
Yeah. And did you feel that sort of emotionally at the time, or did you sort of accept as it was what it was?
No, it really only it's only later in life that I realised how much that affected me. I didn't think it, at the time, this is kind of a weird way to put it. At the time, I didn't think it bothered me. Looking back, I realised how much it affected me. But at the time I was like, well, I guess this is normal, is it? This is what I've got to do, you know.
Yeah. Wow. What about then, so you know, what was the leap then to bring you on to put you on the path of the performer that you are now? I mean, maybe it's worth doing a bit of you know, saying a bit about what you do now and stuff, but what was it that took you from that kind of the difficulty with accessing, you know, piano and the music generally? You know, how did you make that step to still become a performer?
It was just really slow, painful steps with no thought for even my own access needs. I never perceived myself as disabled. I sort of was like, oh, I've got this thing, but you know, I'm not disabled. It's just a thing, you know. And but I always had trouble accessing things like performing with gigs and stuff, just because maybe venues were just like rubbish. Maybe there's a cool place that everyone wants to play that's up some awkward stairs or whatever. But I was just kind of trucking along like everyone else. I played in bands, and I was really super ambitious. And I'm definitely I ended up being a solo artist largely because I just couldn't get. I took music incredibly seriously as a teenager. And I think that was intimidating for anyone who I wanted to work with, and it just naturally fell into the path of being a solo artist. Yeah, just doing what I could do, access the gigs that I could, and access instruments the way I could, which at the point of sort of my mid-20s or whatever, that wasn't a big deal. I was playing guitar okay. I was starting to make a little bit of noise actually with some stuff that I was putting out. BBC Six had got behind one of my singles, and it was kind of starting to look like something was going on. But it was around the time that my impairment, especially my right hand, was really starting to struggle with playing guitar, and that was like a really big, scary kind of ordeal for me, because it was like my identity was really wrapped up in the guitar, and things were starting to go somewhere, and yet I was facing gigs feeling like, not even feeling like, knowing that I couldn't play, a particular song or whatever, something that people might expect me to play. And I remember taking one of those songs out of the set because my hand impairment was just too severe at that point for me to play. And it sounds awfully dramatic now, but I really felt like I was on the ropes. I really thought my days, as a minimum, my days as a live performer were done. But then I went into the studio to try and make a record, and I was doing a vlog for the first time, and that vlog became not about the music but about the access barriers. Even in the studio I was struggling to play guitar, and it was all just like a really scary, dark time. I remember the last time someone asked me to play a gig locally as a sort of solo acoustic artist, I drove about halfway to the venue and then turned around. I was just like, no, this is it, it's done. So yeah, it was a weird time, and that is around the time that I was like, well, hang on, I can't possibly be the only disabled musician who's facing these barriers. But growing up in a really small village, like I was definitely token disabled kid at my school, and but that didn't make any sense. So I went on Twitter, as you do, was the done thing then, before it went really horrible, and I was like, well, where are the disabled musicians? And people kept saying to me, you need to talk to a charity called Drake Music in London. And I went, okay, I'll do that. And that was the start of the journey. Of one of the first things that happened for me with Drake Music was being put in a room with like 20 other people who identified as disabled and were musicians, and some of them were, doing really good stuff and were certainly more successful and further along in their careers than I was. But I'd never met anyone like that before. So to be put in that situation and just spend the day jamming and hanging out with people who were disabled and amazing musicians, it was just like, wow, that was a huge step for me.
Yeah. And so you got in touch with Drake then, and this world opened up, but then instrumentally, what changed for you then when you came to Drake?
So around that time there was a technologist called Gowan Hewitt who worked at Drake Music, and we started having a lot of conversations about technology and ways that I could overcome the barriers. What would music making look like if my hand impairment got worse, as it inevitably would? How would I access things beyond? The big thing was that Gowan saw was an identity thing of who am I without the guitar, and where's my music going with without the kind of roots that I knew, and how can modern kind of accessible technology help me in that way? And it's a well documented narrative. I've talked about this before. I had big ambitions. When I was like 14, I wanted to be Steve Vai. So at first, the accessible tech thing of playing around with like light sensors and playing scales and simple things like that, I've come around to the value of those things in the settings that I work in nowadays. But at the time, this is like 5 or 6 years ago, I was like, I can't see myself being a tech person. I can't see how this is going to make sense to me as a musician. I just wanted to play pointed guitars like that one there. But around that time, Drake Music were having a conversation with Imogen Heap's team. Imogen Heap is an amazing singer-songwriter, one of my favourite artists anyway, who was developing this new incredible technology called the Memu Gloves, which is a wearable technology. She was trying to solve a problem that her music was primarily electronic, and as she put it, you're really just watching a woman singing with a laptop, and for all you know, she's checking her emails. You don't know why that laptop's there. You don't know where the music's coming from, and she wanted something visual to say, this is where the sound comes from, but you can't play some strange sound that you've warped in Ableton Live. It has no basis in a physical thing to start with, so how do you turn that into something tangible? Well, the idea was this gestural interface with the Memu Gloves, and Gowan and I were like, wow, quite by accident, she's invented an incredible piece of accessible technology, something that learns the user's movements, has artificial intelligence, and just deals with whatever movement you give it. Whether my movement is impaired or not is just sort of irrelevant. I can't move the notes on the piano to be more accessible to my right hand, but with a glove, well, you could put them anywhere you want, couldn't you? And that was kind of the light bulb moment, and it was pretty casual. Drake Music had sort of committed to joining what they called the Collaborator program. There was a lady, you might have heard of her name's Ariana Grande. She also joined the Collaborator program at that time. She was one of the first people to try out the gloves. And then very casually at that same time, Gowan said to me, do you want to have a go with them gloves then? And I went, yeah, I'll have a go. And I thought I might get like a blog post out of it at most. And that was it really. I went to a party at Imogen Heap's house and they gave us some gloves and the rest was history. And it really was pretty dramatic what happened next for me, my career.
Wow.
You know, like I say, I felt like I was on the rocks. And a year after that, after a bumpy start of trying to learn how to use the gloves, which was a little, you know, kind of getting my head around the technology. A year later, I was starting my first tour, which was a UK tour, headlining venues. Like I was used to playing to 10 people in a pub in Tamworth. I was suddenly doing a headline tour. I was on TV, doing stuff on BBC News. People were coming up to me in Sainsbury's going, "You're that guy with the gloves, aren't you?" And that tour went on for 18 months. It ended at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. in front of a sea of people. And I went, oh, I'm back. Oh, this is cool. Because it really was just like 2 years previous to that, I was thinking, well, what is the future for me? Between that technology and the understanding that I got from Drake Music was the path to a career that I just couldn't have even imagined at that point.
Absolutely. And it sounds, I mean, it sounds like it was a very collaborative process as well when it came to sort of how will it work for you? What do you need from it?
It was sort of. It was actually really like, it started with like at that party at Imogen's house and we'd had a beer and Gowan was like, listen man, I've got it. This is the vision, mate. You're going to be the disabled artist to put this stuff on the map. It's just going to be you and the gloves. 2 years time, man, you're going to be playing in front of thousands of people. I can see it now. This is what's going to happen. And I went, okay. It didn't sound like something that could happen, but yeah, he was right. So it did happen. We got there, but it's about really, you know, the technology is great, but it's also about having the framework of understanding. Like Gowan's like a producer and done other stuff in the music industry, and he was the first person in the music industry that like noticed me. Like he heard one of my songs and got in touch, and he was like, dude, this is like, what are you doing? This is amazing stuff. And I was like, I'm not really doing anything actually, because there's nothing going on.
Yeah. Wow. Those chance meetings, amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for that, Chris. If anything has popped up, dear listeners, from what Chris has been saying in his sort of lived experience time there, please pop it in the chat or ask us a question. I'm going to share some slides now and Chris is going to talk you through them. So here we go. These are on Mentimeter.
I do feel like we've led to a conclusion that we've sort of and we're ahead of time. I feel like we should answer the inevitable question of what is this?
Oh, you're quite right. You're quite right, Chris.
Should we do that? Should we do that?
And I'm going to spotlight you for everyone so that they can.
All right. So we've really hyped this up now as like, what is this mystical technology that Imogen Heap has invented? So we thought we'd better show you what it is. So it's easier to just show you than try and explain. It's a way of playing multiple different instruments. I use it to create all sorts of layers of sounds. You're probably familiar with concepts like live looping, which is something Ed Sheeran has made very popular, looping sounds. So I'm just going to do a little bit of live looping now, just very quickly, just to demonstrate what it is that we're talking about. Just going to shift this out of the way for a sec. No pressure. I always hate doing this on Zoom. I just never know if it's like, yeah, it's fine. You can see it, right?
Amazing.
And that's how it works.
So good, and brilliant as well. Actually, that's a good thing about Zoom. Actually, is that when your hands are out here, that is what we see, and every
Yeah, it actually is quite cool the way it's kind of like close-up magic. I guess you can really see what's happening with the gloves.
Yeah,
and they look cool.
They are really, really cool. Do they have to be plugged in?
Only for Zoom, because we're using the wireless connection to make this call, but normally no, this is all hands-free. But yes, you've noticed the wires trailing around, but just for Zoom purposes.
Oh, great. We got a interesting question from Namala in the chat here. Namala, do you want to? I'm happy to read it to Chris, but feel free to unmute if you'd like to ask it as well. But I'm happy to put it to Chris. So it's about mental health, and the access points are very unclear and hard to discover and communicate. Do you have any insights on this, or do you know of any examples in which access needs for someone with mental health disability was taken care of? It's an interesting point.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Unfortunately, I don't have any clear kind of experience, mainly because I feel like I've not really had an opportunity to be supported in that sense. I've had my own mental health issues, been through a fairly significant one recently as a result of changing some pain medication, which sent me on a bit of a I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder very recently as a result of changing some medication. And yeah, it was a really scary experience. I've always had issues with mental health, but there was all these kind of new access barriers that I just felt like I've always had like the mental energy to do a lot of stuff. The period of activity that went from like nothing to like world tour was very took a lot of focus and then took a lot of kind of mental stamina, and I felt like I had that, and then there was this new thing in my mind that was like it was just gone and I just didn't have it. I guess we're going to talk about we are going to get into the social model, and hopefully I'm thinking more and more about how the social model can be applied to this sort of stuff, so hopefully some of that will be covered in the session, and maybe we could pick up on it at the final Q&A once we've gone into that some sort of stuff. But I want to also say I'm on that journey myself, and I'm trying to work that out.
It's a nice point that I think to bring up, that in terms of access and social model and everything that we talk about and do at Drake, we always feel like it is a journey, and though we have some experience of some answers, we don't have all the answers, and we're always learning all the time and looking for different things. So the journey element I think is really nice to bring up there, Chris. Okay,
Sarah.
Yes, please.
Thank you. That's amazing. Thank you. That is like, you know, one of my first gigs. I remember one of the first big gigs as a security guard coming up to me and being like, I've been filming this on my phone. Like, my nephew's got cerebral palsy. I just cannot wait to show him what you're doing. So yeah, thank you. It makes it all feel like worthwhile. To answer the question, yeah, I mean, like my movement looks kind of busy-ish, but I mean, the sensors would, like I say, the sensors would track pretty much whatever you feed into them. We also there is also like this thing, which is like a more child-focused thing called the Mini Glove, which Drake Music is starting to work with, which is even like an even more simple thing. But yeah, like I think any movement, even without dexterity, there's still like, if there's arm movement, or you know, there's lots that can be captured with the combination of the sensors and the artificial intelligence. So yeah, I'm hopeful. I don't think, one thing I'm wary of is when I first started, there was a lot of press attention, as I've mentioned, which was great, but there was also kind of not a backlash exactly, but a kind of frustrating thing for us at Drake Music was there was a lot of press that was starting to go down the road of like, hey, they've solved the problem for disabled people to play music. And it's like, yeah, no, we solved a lot of problems for me, but this isn't always a solution for everybody. But you know, some people, like, it's not going to be accessible to absolutely everyone, but there are a lot that it can do, certainly. And I think that in the setting that you're talking about, yeah, I do think, I don't know the exact specifics of the circumstance, but yeah, it can do a lot in terms of what movement you give it. Hope that makes sense.
Great. Thanks for that, Chris. So we should jump into some of the other slides now. I'm going to share this first one, which again is on Mentimeter if you prefer, but also should be on your screen now as well. And I'll let Chris talk you through it.
Okay. Every disabled person should have the opportunity to develop and utilise their creative, artistic and intellectual potential, not only for their own benefit, but also for the enrichment of society. And that's the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Disabled Persons. Does anything about that leap out to anyone immediately? There is one point that I was sort of make about this quote. If anyone has any thoughts they want to put in the chat straight away while I just unbuckle myself from these things. The thing that I think about when I read that is the last bit, the enrichment of society. Like, for me, like, overcoming barriers and dealing with inclusion isn't something for disabled people that's going to happen like over there. This isn't about just solving a problem for disabled people who are somehow separate from society, which is kind of like how it feels like we're talked about quite often. Society is going to be a better place for being inclusive, and including disabled people in society makes it better not only for disabled people but surely for everyone, that those barriers are broken. How many times I've been in awkward experiences with non-disabled people, I think, well, if in a more inclusive society those things wouldn't happen so much, would they? So there's this benefits everybody is really the thing that I always think about.
Absolutely. I'm going to jump forward now to as the slide says, some simple exercises to use to be more inclusive.
More inclusive and accessible.
Yeah.
Cool. So we're going to talk about making our communication a little more accessible. And one of the ways that we're going to do this is through a system called the sign name. Now, you're probably, well, almost certainly familiar with sign language. Primarily in this country, we would use BSL, British Sign Language. Now, one of the issues that sign language brings about is spelling and names. Spelling of names can become quite a long-winded sign, and the sign name is a really great, simple solution to solve that problem, because often words have one sign for them and names don't necessarily. So the idea behind the sign name is to create your own sign for yourself. Now, in a setting, you know, pre-COVID days when we were, you know, out and about and, you know, not on Zoom, I would say to people, you're going to create a sign with your hands and it's going to be on a screen, and conveniently enough, we're all on a screen. So it works very well in this setting. The sign name, the idea normally is that you're going to share something about yourself in the sign. I'll do mine because it makes it a lot clearer. So my name's Chris, and I like loud, heavy metal music. So my sign name in these settings is Chris. So I'm going to describe that, audio describe that. I'm going to raise my fists in front of me, and I'm going to extend my index finger and my little finger. So if you're there, whether you're on camera or not, please feel free to join me in my sign name. Thanks, Sarah. Right. So I'm just going to really quickly just dive. Well, actually, B, could you share your sign name?
Sure, yeah, mine changes on quite a regular basis, but particularly in the context of doing any kind of delivery, I get quite wired and I'm quite hyperactive and tend to talk quite fast. So mine is B for activity's sake.
B. That's good. That's good. Would anyone? I'm just going to somebody unmute themselves or put their hand up if they're up for doing one, and then I might just ask someone to do one. Anne, thank you. Could you share something about yourself via a sign name? Or could you unmute yourself as well so we can hear you?
I'm Anne, and I like to play the piano, so I guess mine would be something like this. Is it too much action?
No, that's good. That's really good, and it works on screen. I think it's really interesting that as musicians, we all tend to identify with the music or that we like, or the instrument that we play with. I almost never see a sign name that isn't to do with music. A sign name sort of solves half the problem because it includes people who are hearing impaired to be able to communicate a name without the fiddling and dexterity needed for spelling long names, which is why the sign name exists. But it's only half the story in terms of how we can improve our communication. And another way that we can improve our communication is through audio description, which B and I did at the start. I'm the Regulation man bun. I'm wearing my Toronto Raptors jumper. It's bright red. I've got a beard. I'm a white man, etc., etc. That was all in a very jumbled order, but you get the idea. And what we find is with audio descriptions, by describing stuff, it's a really good way, a kind of a good in to... That's a good one. Singer, yeah. So the audio description is also a good way to give away a little bit of information about yourself and maybe your circumstances. I always reference the fact that I've got lockdown hair. It's in a man bun because you can't get your hair cut at the moment. So my hair's just growing and growing and growing. Again, I'd like really quickly, B and I have done our audio descriptions. Would anyone like to volunteer before I very... sneakily, I've got you all on screen, so would anyone volunteer to give us an audio description of themselves as they appear on screen now?
I don't mind doing.
Thank you, Sarah. I was just about to pick on you, but there you go. You dived in.
Okay, so my name is Sarah. I am a white female with a lockdown fringe, dark hair, and I am sitting in front of a light blue background with Nimos's logo on it.
Excellent, cool. See, I like the opportunity for narrative here, especially with lockdown hair. It's good to sort of set up. You can give away some clues about who you are. Normally in settings and stuff, I've got really outrageous hair, pink or blue or something. So that's always good to describe. Right. Okay, so yeah, combining something we would kind of encourage is combining those methods of communication as a more inclusive way of communicating who you are. It's not perfect, of course. Sign name requires hands, it requires a degree of hand dexterity. So none of these solutions are going to be 100% like this is the inclusive solution. Like I said with the hype about the gloves, it doesn't solve everybody's problem.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I wanted to just bring up from Sarah what you said at the very beginning in your comments about how it can be helpful and what you do. Identifying an emphasis, on those who identify as disabled, working along musicians who don't consider themselves disabled, and that's a really interesting thing about signing your name and audio describing yourself, is that you may only be improving access to your session for significantly for one person in the room, but you won't be harming, and you'll be giving, as Chris says, a bit more context and depth about yourself for everyone else as well. And so there's that idea that sometimes access is extra and tagged on, but if it becomes part of everything that you do, you include more people in a more meaningful way than not, and it won't hurt anyone that doesn't need it. It's an interesting thing to think about, I think.
Yeah, access rarely holds anyone who doesn't need it back. Like a ramp doesn't impair somebody's access to a building if they don't use a wheelchair, for example. That's something like access should include everyone. Okay, so we're going to head to the slide, and we're going to talk about the social model of disability. And I'm going to give you we've talked a little bit about my lived experience and a bit of context for this. So I grew up a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So I was born in the 80s, and I was a kid in the 90s, and it was that culture at that time. I certainly never heard of the social model of disability, and it was very much framed in what I hinted at earlier, which was the medical model of disability, which is this idea that I've got something wrong with me. I've got to go through the process of having things done. I've have surgeries and things, and the end goal being that I need to be fixed to fit into society, because this is my problem to solve, what's happening with my body. And it was very, very late in the day, only when I was introduced to Drake Music, that I became aware of the social model of disability, which says that being disabled is caused by the way society is organised rather than the person's impairment or difference. This is not to ignore the impairment, and there are limits to the social model idea, of course. Like, I'm still facing pain and certain things that aren't necessarily easily kind of, some aspects of being disabled don't go away when you apply the social model, but certainly applying the social model has really transformed my life in terms of how I think about myself. Like I said, about awkward exchanges with non-disabled people. I used to carry that around with me. If people were weird and awkward about me, like, I felt bad, like I just couldn't, just cringing inside. And now I'm just like, this isn't my problem, is it? This is how society operates. I can just ignore. If you want to be weird and, like, try and create if you're just going to ask me weird stuff in public, that's your problem to solve. Like, I don't have to go along with any of this. I mean, looking at ways to remove barriers that restrict life choices for disabled people, one of the big social model issue for me is, like, I tour a lot, and I've had a lot of success in great places and playing wonderful places like Tokyo and Washington DC. You only hear about the gigs that happened and went well. I don't also have a blog of all the times I turned down gigs because I couldn't access the stage, because there isn't a safe, accessible route to that stage. And I do turn down a lot of stuff because they can't meet my access needs. If there was safe access, like ramps and stuff, to those stages, that wouldn't exclude any of the non-disabled artists. And that is, like, a really important thing, that it's not the medical model thing would be like, well, I need to go and do more on myself. I need to get surgeries. I do need to do whatever I need to do so that I don't need that accessible route. But that's the medical model way of thinking about it. The onus is on society to be more accessible. Should we head to the next slide? Obviously, we're whizzing through this because we haven't got loads of time. That is a pretty slide. But if any questions come up as we go through this.
I'm muted, I'm sorry. Yes, do keep popping questions in. We wanted to have a little bit of space now. Chris talked a little bit there about the social model. But also we'd like to bring this sort of into educational learning settings, thinking a bit about where you're working. So we might be thinking about a classroom, we might be thinking about a centre where you work with musicians or what would like to. I think as we're a smaller number, we can all try this if you're feeling like it. You see at the top of the bar here where it says B Hubble is sharing her screen. To the right of that, there should be something that says options. You can click on that and go down to annotate, and then you'll be able to draw on this whiteboard as well. So we normally have someone doing the scribing, but yeah, we're small in number, so we're safe, I think, to all give it a go. What we can do on here is you can either draw, or you can pop in the chat something about your classroom or space where you work or might be working. and it'd be good to think about some of those features in the room, you know, sort of every day. So I'm gonna put some walls in to start us off. There we are. And maybe you're in a space with lots of tables, or lots of bookshelves, or lots of posters on the wall, or huge windows where the light comes in very bright. Give us a bit of info on your space, and either I can draw it or feel free to add it in yourself as well in the chat.
I'm just going to chime in. It's probably looking at this from a slightly different angle. I don't have the artistic prowess to do it, so I'm just going to say it out loud. I often work in settings in schools where, as a wheelchair user, that poses an access barrier from the off in terms of just an obstacle course of like stuff is too close together, or you know, there's just too. It becomes difficult. I arrive at a setting that's difficult to get around in quite often, and that is can be frustrating. That's more likely to happen in a mainstream setting, but it has happened to me in settings that were intended to be more inclusive. So maybe think about that when we're drawing our classroom. I'm going to hand this over to somebody who can draw.
What's your main thing there then, Chris?
I'd like it that the desks were, there was room for me as a wheelchair user to get around in this classroom.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to, instead of putting in loads of desks, I'm going to put in just a few, with some space between them, wide aisles and such. Some really nice desks coming in here. This is a show that I've not been anywhere near IKEA for months. I've forgotten what they look like.
What is a desk? I can't remember now.
B, I think I heard the task wrong. I thought we were drawing things that created barriers.
I've gone with.
So I should erase my set of stairs, should I then? Are we doing?
No, Chris.
I think we're messing with the system here. I think those desks would be closer together. So for the sake of time,
Okay.
let's just imagine that we're. I think you're right, Sarah. Yeah, we're looking at the barriers that.
Okay.
Okay, so leave your stairs, Sarah. I'm going to add more desks in an inaccessible manner. There we go.
Oh, this is a nightmare. I'd be
That's
fuming
lovely.
in this classroom.
Yes, yeah. Look at that. Anything else that is pesky in the space? Anyone's working?
I feel like as well, I just want to fly the flag that for me, like I tick a really simple box because I'm just like a dude. I'm like a white dude. I'm a middle class guy. I've just got this one thing that I use a wheelchair. So people like my access barriers are really easy to frame in this setting, like, you know, wheelchair access and steps and desk, and this all looks very inaccessible to me. But I want to think about that almost as like the first rung of like access barriers, because there are more complex things going on for some people than you know, wheelchair access should be a really easy problem to solve, I think, and there are more complex things that happen in settings that make it less inclusive to people, as I'm sure some of you will have experienced with your participants.
I have some anecdotal stuff there, if I may. But in some schools that I've worked in before, where there's been no dedicated music room, and I've been working with children who have quite specific needs in terms of attention and focus, and they're very active and quite young as well. But I've been put in rooms where there's just so many things in the room, because that's where everyone goes to do the extra activities, you know, that isn't English, Maths and Science. And so there's all these toys in there, and I would have to go in about half an hour early and be turning all of these drawers around to face the wall, throwing sheets over stuff that I couldn't move to make it just so that I could have a landscape that was clear and calm. So to depict that, I'm going to just do a big squiggle in this corner, which is stuff. General stuff, which isn't to do with what you're trying to do in the room.
Yeah.
Namala, your person there is magnificent. Thank you for that. Strip lights. Yes, strip lights are evil and the devil. Thank you for the person who's put those in. Yes. Oh, it looks dreadful, doesn't it? It looks wonderfully inaccessible.
There's an important clue in the facial expression, isn't there, about the this, I think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I feel like this is quite the giant window. Yes. Things can be it's quite cathartic, yeah, to do a sort of group draw like this. This is our dump of, everything. PE kit just hanging about. Yeah, wow. Absolutely. Cool. Okay. Do you feel like it's inaccessible enough, Chris, or do you want to put some other stuff in there?
I mean, yeah, it's making me feel a little bit ill and stressed just looking at it.
I'm gonna do a nice clean sheet then here. Okay, great. So let's think about this next stage then, which is money no object, and space in our schools and workplaces no object. What could we do to make our space better than this? What's important? Again, feel free to draw or drop things in the chats, or use the text box on the screen, on your annotation bar to type stuff. Oh, Sarah, you've jumped in with a beautiful ramp, instantly recognisable. It's glorious.
It's a ramp, yeah, it's a good ramp.
Really nice.
I'm just gonna. This isn't a reflection on your drawing. I just want to split hairs about ramps for a minute, just because they're a real problem for me. I go to so many places that have made some effort. They've got the ramp, but the ramp is just a cruel gradient, and it's just like a real, like, there's like a box ticking thing going on where people will go, well, we've got a ramp. Yeah, that ramp isn't. That's like a, that's some serious endurance to get it. There are rules about this that, in terms of ramp gradients, that don't get followed very easily. Very often, I should say. Adjustable lights. I led a wonderful project with Drake Music, obviously pre-pandemic, 2019. We were in a school in Coventry, and we had a dedicated sensory room, and it was like, there was no clutter, everything was controllable, ambience, temperature, lighting. It was just, it was such a beautiful experience. Like when you get it right, it's wonderful.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Thank you for changing the gradient of the ramps.
Yes. I've done and I've put your point in there, Sarah, sorry, neutral decoration. This is a clear wall, maybe with the opportunity to hang some stuff on it if you needed it. I'll put some hooks on it, for
a music leader that doesn't look angry and confrontational. That's like
beautiful,
quite a significant thing in terms of like anxiety and everything. Like if someone's behavior as the music leader is in any way confrontational or intimidating, that's a huge access barrier for people. And it's not for, I think that's where the social model stuff is really interesting, because for someone with like living with anxiety or any kind of mental health issue, like it's really, like society seems really geared up to tell people to like pull themselves together or cheer up, or it's not that bad. One of the worst things for me is when people try and frame it that this idea that there's always someone worse off than you, and I just don't think that's helpful at all. And if we're applying the social model, then we need to think about how our own behaviour as music leaders and how we can be more approachable and inclusive to people who face those kinds of barriers. And these, like I was saying at the start of this exercise, when I go into a room, you see my wheelchair, you get a sense of the barriers. But actually, people don't. There are other barriers that I face that are not physical or not visible, and those are no less significant.
Absolutely. I want to know what this setup in front of our beautiful music teacher is. Looks good. Great. So, it's a couch. Oh, perfect. Yes, of course it is. I can see it now. Thank you. Wow, total 3D, nailing that. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Like a magic eye thing. I was like, oh, I can see it.
Yes, I really can now. Love to. That's brilliant. What a great shout, because obviously a desk chair is not great for everyone. It's nice to be able to move in the space. I appreciate that our space now has space for people to move around in it, space for chairs to move around in it, and also alternative seating as well. It's really nice. And I've noted your question in the chat there. Chris, have you seen that? Is there some guidance to accompany the DDA in that regard, ramps, etc.?
Yes. I'm just Chat is not updated for me.
Ah,
And I've just accidentally drawn a line on.
no. Oh, beautiful drawing.
Oh, here we go. Right. There is online. I'll just have a quick look where I found it. There are some really specific things about the percent, the gradient percentage. Let me see if I can find that very quickly, and I'll share it.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to save this our beautiful drawing and come out of stop our share now. Thanks, everyone. That's great. That will be. I might tweet them actually. Maybe those pictures. We'll see. They are super. Okay. So. While Chris is just looking that up, I'll say to you that we just touched on there the aesthetics of access, which is when access requirements and access tools are used creatively as an integral part of the work rather than an add-on to a space. Chris, do you want to say a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think one of them. There's been a few beautiful examples of the aesthetics of access. One of my favourite things was with the Grey Eye Theatre Company that I used to work with. Sarah Fisher also worked with them on that project with me. They had this thing of like audio descriptions. And obviously we've done a bit of audio description. And normally in theatres, audio description is just sort of dryly piped in for people on a headset. They had this idea that there was a character in the play, Reasons to be Cheerful, that was Nana is in hospital, right? So the characters had a payphone, and they would go to the payphone, and the setup at the start of the play was like, "Oh, Nana's in hospital, so like we're just going to give her a bell every now and again and just let her know what's going on. Is that all right with everyone?" Talking to the audience, those various actors in the play would occasionally get on the payphone and tell Nana what was going on. That audio into that payphone was feeding the audio descriptions in the audience. So the audio description was in character and embedded into the play itself, rather than being someone dryly standing at the side reading off a script. What happened was people who didn't require it, non-disabled people who had no access barrier to the play, were using the audio description as well to enhance their own experience, because actually the audio description made the experience of the play even better for everyone. And that is what we mean when we talk about baked in access. The obvious example in my own career was that I love futuristic technology. I love this cutting edge stuff. I have this real fascination with this cyborg look. This technology not only solved the access barriers, but it felt right. It felt real to me. It wasn't just like, it didn't feel like a mobility aid. Like I feel a bit like about my crutches. They don't look cool, or, you know what I mean? They're just like, I need them to get around. They have no kind of aesthetic charm. This idea that the access tool should really serve the vision of what that disabled person is, who that disabled person is, and their identity. And we take that really seriously.
Yeah, that's great. I was just thinking as well about the aesthetics and what we've talked about there. You know, we said, you know, jokingly, money no object. Obviously money is an object, and obviously there are those conversations that need to be had before things start about what a room is like. And I think it's just something really interesting important to think about, and for us all to feel enabled and with some language and with some examples to bring to the people who can affect those changes within a setting. You know, talking to head teachers about what might need to change, or, you know, having a discussion about perhaps different storage things that can put things out of the way, literally, you know, new desks that can be bought, or is it okay if we set them up in a different way, because that will really help, again, the access to stuff. It's so that's another sort of tangent of it really, is that I hope that has been useful to sort of think about what it's okay to ask for, and what could help a situation, a space be really much better to work in. We've got time for a scenario, Chris. Will we do a scenario?
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about a way to kind of apply some of this stuff, like a social model approach, but also a aesthetics of access kind of approach. So we're just going to give you a real quick hypothetical scenario. So you've got a participant who has a hearing impairment and uses a hearing aid. They want to play the violin, and they want to play the violin in a rock band, and that poses some access barriers. And I want you to really quickly we're just going to sort of blue sky, as they say, think about ways that we could frame a social model approach. So we're certainly not going to turn around and say, this probably isn't for you. Like, we're going to make this inclusive. We're going to make this happen. And what can we do to serve not only the access needs of this person, but also thinking about the aesthetics of access, and what can we do to make the accessible technology exciting and part of this person's identity. They kind of want to play in a goth rock band, they want to play the violin, but they've got some hearing issues and they're using a hearing aid, and just turning up in a band is going to be difficult without some changes. How can we improve the access to this?
That's
any thoughts?
and straight off.
I think that's a good answer, and I think one of the things, of course, you could do is using rather than trying to amplify, using a microphone to amplify an acoustic violin, and then how you're going to get that back to the person who needs that in their ear. An electronic violin would definitely make that easier.
Absolutely. Nice. In rehearsals, arrange the band in a way that allows everyone to see each other and give visual cues. Yeah,
good. Yes.
Yeah. Thinking about that, the visual cues and perhaps some sensory clues as well. There's some brilliant devices called resonance boards that are large pieces of basically plywood on a frame, and they sitting on them or interacting near them, they resonate with sound, so they help pick up vibrations and can really improve connection to the rhythm of what's going on around as well, or being nearer the speakers as well is also a really good option for that.
Do we have time to try? Should we try one more?
Totally, let's do it.
Try something different. Okay, so we've got 3 participants who have behavioural issues and short attention spans. They have been previously excluded in some settings for what's been termed as disruptive behaviour. They're really interested in rap music and they want to learn to beatbox, but how is that session going to run in a way that is inclusive to them, given their challenges in terms of attention and behaviour? I feel like we should have the countdown music. I've been in this setting. I have a similar setting like this. I have.
Oh, nice.
That was the first thing I was going to say. Is that just like in terms of delivery, I think it helps when I hope when I go into these settings, I seem different to their music teacher with my pink hair or whatever, and that they get a clue that it might be fun. Providing them an opportunity to suggest ideas and feel in control. Yeah,
totally.
Definitely, that's important.
Yeah, we've used those things, learning contracts before, where we write those in tandem with the young people. What would you like to get out of this? Let's find a way for you to get there. Nice. Oh, have fun, build a beatbox conversation. Yes, lots of very tasks that reinforce the same specific access. I mean, the joy of doing sessions like this is that everyone is brilliant and is switched onto this, and it's just really great to hear those ideas come in, and know that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, and I hope that brings the idea of implementing access right up to the fore. Regular breaks and chat about interests. Yes, Sarah, absolutely. Yes.
One thing I've had some success with recently is adapting. Has anyone heard of the Pomodoro technique, which is something I've sort of adapted in this setting, which is basically a productivity technique where you would set a timer. I use it for my own work anyway, so I'll set a timer for 25 minutes and then I'll take a 5-minute break, and I'll work for 25 minutes, and wherever I am in that work at 25 minutes, I will stop and have a break, and I'll keep that timer visually somewhere in my peripheral vision, so I always know how long I'm going to work for. And 25 minutes is a long time, but that's relative to these settings. But using a timed sort of thing of we're going to do this task for this amount of time, and you're always going to know, participants are always going to be able to see that timer and always going to have a sense of where they are in that task. This is an access barrier, but for my young son, he has just, like, bless him, no concept of time. I'll say to him, can you tidy your room, mate? And he'll say, well, that's going to take me 9 weeks. He doesn't know that he can do it in 20 minutes. He doesn't know the difference between 20 minutes and 9 weeks. He's 5. But having that timer there has been really useful, and I've used it in settings, and just having a sense of, like, this isn't forever. We're just doing this for a moment.
That's such a good idea. That's brilliant. Amazing.
But also the important thing is that the participants can see the timer. It's not just for you to be like, I'll let you know when this is done. They must know what's happening at all times.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Yes, Grace has used the countdown clock as well. Amazing. I've just got a slide to share at this moment, which is one of our favourite slides here at Drake Music, which is this important quote. Where did this quote come from, Chris?
Yes, I know. I'm not sure. I'm going to credit this to John Kelly, probably one of those wise people. John Kelly, the superstar that is. Nothing about us without us. Yeah, obviously, it would be. I'm really grateful to Drake Music for giving me these opportunities, because I think it would be strange if a non-disabled person came and told you this stuff and was handing you sort of third-hand experience about what it's like to live with this stuff. And Drake Music's an amazing champion for this exact thing of allowing disabled people to tell this story. And it's often, there's so much in history about decisions being made about disabled people for us without any inclusion in terms of government policy, disability benefits, all sorts of things have happened without any thought for including us in that. So this is a really kind of the mantra to live by.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Moving. Oh, sideways. Oh, I'm on the wrong window. Am I? Yes, stop share. Coming out of that. Sorry, everyone. Too many windows open. Like it's like a flight deck on my screen. So we've not really touched that much today. We've talked more about the social model of disability, Chris's lived experience of that, some things to do with creating better access when considering that. But what I want to flag to you all who are here today, particularly those of you who haven't come across us very much, the charity, is that we have technology as the really, I was going to change it from a moving GIF because I find those so irritating, the repetition. But we have technology, and so what I wanted to say is today we've talked about the social model, and we have further training courses and discussions and also webinars going on that talk about the technology that's out there, how to use it, what's available, how much it costs, whether you need some help setting it up. So I just wanted to say we've talked about the kind of the theory away from our own musical tech today, but that stuff is very much there, so do look us up for that, and if there's any way we can support, please get in touch. My inbox is always open, as are the other inboxes of all of our Drake team. So yes, that's there. I'm going to move away from this because it's just so rotating. There we go. This is quite a nice slide to sort of give us a bit of a roundup as well, which Chris, I didn't run this one by you, is it all right?
It's great. It's all good stuff.
Oh, good, because it was written by John Kelly as well. So.
Of course.
Of course.
When you met one disabled person, yes, you've met one disabled person.
You've met, yeah.
Yeah.
So, just thinking about this one, as we've heard Chris's experience today, exactly. So the gloves are great and fantastic, but as Chris said, they work for him, and they may not work for somebody else, or they may work differently for somebody else. That's okay. I like the second point on this slide: fit the instrument to the people, not the people to the instrument. I think that's a really nice place to bring in dialogue and say, what is it you want to do, and how can we help you get there, rather than we're going to put you on this. It's a very powerful bit of delivery by one of our new emergent artists, Miss Jackie, last week at the Sound Connections conference, and she said with her impairment when she was at school, in her groups she was always given the triangle, because in that way she was included. Yeah, Sarah, you're nodding. Yeah, that, you know, you're in the band then if you're going to play the triangle, but no one asked her. What she really wanted to do was play the drums or sing. So it's that communication. Is as the fourth point says, be open to a variety of forms of communication. So I wanted to give a tiny bit of space at the end now for questions, comments, thoughts, and say thank you very much for listening. But please do drop any questions in the chat now if you'd like to ask anything, or unmute yourselves. Again, we are a small and friendly group of excellent artists, as proved by our posterity, our slides, which will remain for posterity. So I'm going to stop this share and leave space open. I'm also going to finally just drop our survey link for this training into the chats. It won't take you very long to do this, and it'd be super helpful for us in our learning if you did have time to have a look at the survey, and that link will be live and can be shared around afterwards as well. But yeah, we've got a couple of minutes for the floor to be open if you have anything else you'd like to ask Chris or bring up.
I'd like to just flag the point that was made about mental health, and I just wonder if the framing things in the social model is helpful at all, just to remind ourselves about the, like I say, these, when I face barriers to do with like wheelchair access, that feels so rudimentary, of like, oh, you know, I see some rickety staircase up to a stage. That's a really simple, like that should be really easy to solve. And I think like the next chapter of this is how we apply these things to mental health issues and things that are not so clearly kind of visible and easy to kind of wrap our heads around. Everyone can understand the need for a ramp in that setting, but there are more subtle ways that we can do business and conduct our sessions and do what we do that's more inclusive to people with mental health barriers. As I'm experiencing on, you know, both sides of that, some of the demands on my time have become intimidating. It's frustrating for me, you know, ramping up for more touring activity in the future and feeling very differently about it to the last time, that, you know, feeling nervous and anxious in ways that I didn't used to. It's really strange when you know, had a change in my mental health relatively recently, experiencing this stuff for the first time and wondering, what could the demands on being placed on me, how could they be different to make this process more inclusive to me? So I guess the best I can do is just keep banging the drum, and the more people who know about the social model, then law of averages, I can be very selfish about this and think, well, it'll all come back round and people will make it easier for me and everyone else. And it benefits everybody, right?
I just wondered if I could add to sorry, I've been multitasking because I've got 2 young kids, so I've not been on the chat so much. It's just a point, really. I really appreciate your input, Chris, as someone with lived experience, because I'm a musician and a music teacher and a music educator, lots of different things, but I've also, as I've mentioned, got a disabled son as well, and actually what I can relate with possibly as a parent, because I'm not living it as a disabled musician, but as a parent, is the social model suddenly makes a lot of sense when you're living it, but it's really important how you and Drake Music and, you know, collaboratively share it, like, to others, because that's part of what I'm trying to do by being on this call today, then sharing it with people who haven't got lived experience. And yeah, it just makes it really clear how much you potentially know through lived experience in whatever form. Obviously, my lived experience is not the same as yours, but I'm seeing probably similar things maybe through my son, and yeah, how important that is to then communicate it effectively to those who don't have lived experience, and that's really come through today. So really appreciate that, and I found it really useful to clarify some of the things I'm thinking. And then those things being, you know, shared as well. So I just wanted to add that to the end of the conversation.
Thanks, Sarah. I just wanted to really quickly make a couple of points on that. Firstly, if you do have any other questions about that, as B said, our emails are open, chrishalpin@drakemusic.org. Feel free to follow up with me. If you have any questions about the gloves at all in your own setting there. The other thing I wanted to just say on that point is what we need really desperately, what I crave is like allies and allyship and people like yourself who are going to champion that and bang that drum. I made a video recently on a YouTube vlog thing about access, because access has been really compromised with the pandemic. For example, my local supermarket, I got stuck in there because the routes between the tills are no longer wide enough for wheelchairs, and lots of disabled people were in my Twitter feed going, yeah, totally know this one, no, like, yeah, right on, Alpin, bang that drum. And it's like, that's great to a point, but I felt like I was sort of preaching to the choir, to use an expression. Like what I need is this video and these ideas to escape the community who already know these problems. Do you know what I mean? Like talking to other disabled people, they already know that access is crap in places at the moment and all this stuff that we have to face. But it's people who don't know that that's a problem yet. Those are the people that these ideas need to get to. And what you're talking about right there is just literally that, being an ally and taking what we've told you today to people who won't know about this stuff and won't have. You have a kind of lived experience, Sarah, that is relevant because you're a parent in this setting, in this understanding this dynamic of disability. So yeah, all I can say is thank you, and please do. You know, that's when it really matters, because you know sometimes I feel like I'm shouting in an echo chamber of people who already know the stuff that I'm talking about.
Thanks.
Brilliant. Well, we're a minute over. So
that's not bad.
I know. That's why they get us in, Chris, because we talk so fast. Yeah. Well, I'll hand you back to Sarah and Grace at NIMAS and just say thank you to for having us here, and it's been so super to meet you all, and thank you for your contributions to the chat and your beautiful drawings, and please stay in touch. So thank you very much.